In this episode of our photography review show, we're going to be reviewing 24 photographers and 7 photography styles. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. For those who don't know me, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now for the last 2 or 3 years I've been reviewing photos of my friends and colleagues, and quite a while ago we decided that we're gonna do the same for our photography community here at Clever Photographer. Now this been very popular and we receive hundreds and hundreds of photos, and this is the reason why we had to go ahead and limit the number of the photos to 1 or 2 per person per week. And also what we do, we actually take the show each week and divide it between 2 or 3 different parts. We usually start with the landscape photography, so we look at all the photographers with the landscape photography style, and then we look at the rest of the photography styles in the other episodes. In today's week, we're gonna be looking at first the landscape photographers and then all the rest of the styles in the second part. And both of the parts you can find on our YouTube channel. So make sure you join us there, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next episode. And also make sure you then like the video and comment under it so we can keep creating content like this. Now, before we're gonna jump into the actual reviewing, I wanted to remind you about our new Facebook photography group. It's called Clever Photographer Academy, and it's been very popular and it's a lot of fun if you enjoy photography just like us. What we do there, we review the photos throughout the week, we play photography competitions and doing monthly giveaways with prizes like Luminar Neo and lots of other interesting stuff. We also answer your photography questions there and just talk all things photography. So if you haven't joined us yet, make sure you head to the Facebook, search for Clever Photographer Academy and join us today so you can have even more fun with photography. But for now we have many pictures to look at, so let's jump straight into it. And here we are with the part 1 where we're going to be looking at landscape photographers. We have many photographers to go through, so let's jump straight into it. We are here in the Lightroom once again. This is Lightroom CC and I have all the photos ready here. So the first photographer is Alex. So let's have a look at the pictures we got from him. Right here we have 3 pictures and let's just talk about the first impression. I really love the colors, Alex. I'm a big fan of the golden hour and of the golden colors. I think they look really cool, your photos. Well done. They're kind of big panoramas, which are quite nice as well. I think here the sun works quite well with a little bit of sun leak. The colors here again are very, very lovely. And I think the kind of orange leaking and the kind of transferring towards the blue works really well here as well. And this is very nice as well. The gradient is a little bit unnatural on this one, but it still looks really cool. So let's talk about them. Starting with the technical part of the image, let's have a look if we have any details. So this one was on Canon, ISO 100, f11, 1/168 of a second. So spot on settings, everything looks sharp right here. I mean, zooming kind of in, looking at it from this view, I think it looks great. Yes, you're getting a little bit of the kind of stuff coming out from the sun, obviously some of the sun and light leaks and different kind of artifacts, but I think in this case it works quite well. It's almost like a movie scene, and from technically I think it's really nicely done and the setting is spot on. On this one, again we are on ISO 100, so keeping everything nice and low. F9 is a good choice. Obviously all the elements are quite far, so they all sharp all the way through. 1/13 of a second as well, no problem there, and I think it works quite well. Finally on this one, again we are back to ISO 100, f9, 1/25 of a second is great. I can see that this is all sharp, and when we kind of zoom in all the way through, the sharpness is there as well. On 3 of them the light is really nice and pleasant, so well done on capturing that. And in overall I think technically all 3 pictures are done quite well. Now when I zoom in a little bit, I guess maybe it's because of the quality of the image or so, I'm getting a little bit of artifacts and noise, so maybe just something to kind of keep an an eye on, but again, I think it's maybe because of the size of the image, so I'm not that worried about it. Talking about composition, this one I love. I think the leading line and the flow of the image I think works really well. Once again, as I mentioned, it looks like from a movie set, really nicely defined depth of the field, obviously kind of creating foreground, middle ground, and then the sun and the mountain at the back. I think it works quite well, Alex. So well done on this one. Everything is there. Lovely panorama, and I think the fact that you're hiding the sun out of the image works quite well, because otherwise it would be probably quite harsh. So overall, well done. Moving on to picture number 2, composition wise, it come across a little bit flat, to be honest, and I think it's because we're missing a foreground element on this one. So even though it's a nice scene and obviously lots of nice light and nice colors, I think the mountain come across a little bit flat. It's just missing something to differentiate a little bit and show us what's actually happening there. I also think that the fact that it all has a kind of similar colors doesn't help in this case. And although it's quite nice image, I don't think there is that much wrong with it. Some kind of foreground would have helped us a little bit when it comes to composition. On this one, this is like a great example of how obviously the foreground can really help to the overall composition. I think some of the kind of flow and leading lines are here. The only problem, or not problem, but the only note would be that it's a bit tricky to say what is your actual focal point, what is it you're trying to show, and what is the main idea here. Is it the kind of rocks in front or the golden glow at the back? Just something to kind of think of. It's always good to pick a certain element and try to show it in the best light. So I think on this one, I think it's a bit difficult to find out what is the main subject. On this one, I think you're missing the foreground element and something to show a little bit more of the depth of the field. And this one, I think when it comes to composition, is perfect. So just some notes to take on board for the next time. When we talk about post-processing, I think this one is spot on. Nothing much I would add. Again, just keep an eye on the noise, and that's about it on this one. I think the colors are actually looking quite natural and well, so it's all good there. I think your shadows are open just enough, maybe almost too much, because they bring some of the noise, so I would maybe keep them close a little bit more and keep them a little bit more darker, but I would have to see the raw file for that to be able to judge that. So I think overall this one works really, really well. On this one and this one, I think even though I really like the golden color and the colors, it comes across almost unnatural. So you have the gradient, and then you have the orange, and then it goes all the way to the blue. So maybe just keep the saturation down a little. That would be my suggestion. I think this one works really well because of the shape and the texture, where this one just looks a little bit unnatural. There is this kind of whole long halo with these kind of colors. So maybe just for the future, just kind of take a day or two after you edit it and look at it again. Or sometimes it's good to show the picture to somebody and see what they say. But that's about it. I think the post-processing, otherwise it's nicely done. The shadows are open. The exposure is good. So just keep an eye on the white balance and the saturation on those two. Otherwise, Alex, great pictures, great images. I'm really impressed. Let's see if we can see. So this is Death Valley in California. This one, I think, is the same location, and this one as well. So brilliant, beautiful places, well captured. Thank you so much for sharing them with us, and I can't wait to see more of your pictures in the future. Moving on, next photographer, Bob. We have 2 images from you. So let's move straight into them. Obviously a mountain here with quite nice flow, and nice light, so well done here. And this one I really like. I think it's something a little bit different, but in overall I think it works really, really well. So let's jump to it. So looking at the pictures, talking about technical element of them, looking at this one, so ISO 250, f18, 1/400 of a second, you were on 16 millimeters. So was it A7 Mark II maybe your camera? Doesn't really matter that much. Just kind of reminder, as always, when it comes to ISO, you want to stay as close as you can to 100, so you make sure you don't add any digital noise in the post-processing, but other than that, I think it works quite well. I think the setting is well. F18, I'm not sure why you went for F18, maybe just making sure that everything is nice and sharp. But other than that, I mean, everything is sharp. There is no noise. There is some sensor dust here and here as well. So Bob, just for the next time, there is a video in the description of this video where I actually show how you can remove the sensor dust in post-processing, and it's really as simple as just clicking on a button here. There is like a healing brush, and then you can click on this visualize spots. It shows the spots, and then really just a few clicks to remove them, and it's done. So something for the future, just to remember to take care of, so it doesn't take away the attention from your beautiful photos. Other than that, this picture is really cool. Talking about this one, let's have a look. So ISO 64, 16 millimeters lens, f 3.2, 1/200 of a second. So let's zoom in. No noise. It's sharp, but not 100% sharp. So I'm wondering, where were you zooming in? The light is quite nice. I like that it's kind of diffuse around the trees, and then you have this blue sky, which creates really nice contrast to the autumn colors. So I think that works really well. And in overall, I like the texture. Just keep an eye on sharpness, but I'm thinking when I'm looking at it that could be also because of the transfer to JPEG, maybe, if it's a JPEG. Yes, it's JPEG. And just kind of to show you, when I zoom in here, really kind of zoom in, you getting lots of chromatic aberration. You can see it really here, the blue, the red. There is a way to remove it in Lightroom to some degree. Let's have a look in optics, remove chromatic aberration. There is also difference, so I can just click on this little eyedropper and click on the blue here, and I can also click on the red sometimes. Let's see if that's gonna help us in any way. Maybe the green here. And it helped a little bit. Obviously, there can be more removed in Photoshop if you need to, but at least like this, and that's about it technically. Otherwise, I think it's quite nicely captured, and I think the picture works on this side. When it comes to composition, this I really like. I really like the flow. This kind of range almost create a leading line leading towards this main subject. So well done there. When we're talking about cropping, I would maybe have cropped it a little bit tighter. Let's see if we unlock it, maybe more something like this. Just again, kind of trying to make it a little bit simpler, but in overall, there is really nothing much I can add. I think it works. I think it's well done, and it's a stunning scene. Talking about this one, just kind of one thing I would probably do, I would keep this view in the center of the image. So I would probably do something like this. Just to make it a little bit more balanced, but in overall, again, not a big deal. I think it's kind of different view, obviously, something a bit different when it comes to composition, but I think it works, and I think it's very pretty. So in overall, both of them works really well for me when it comes to composition, and there is really not much I would change there. In post-processing, as always, keep an eye on your blues in the shadows, just to make sure that you have the white balance well done, but in overall you have. It's really nicely done. It's not always the easiest to edit snow, because the camera sometimes gets kind of pushed off when it comes to white balance and stuff, but I think you've done very well. It looks very good. Again, for the future, just keep an eye on the sensor dust. That would be my one thing I would do. It really takes just a few seconds to remove, and other than that, I think it's really nice, clean edit. Nothing much I would add here. Here I would crop it a little bit tighter, as I showed you already, and maybe just add a vignette to kind of highlight the view and a whole kind of leading line there. So in effects, you could just add a little bit of the vignette here to something like this, and that's about it. In overall, I really like it, Bob. I'm very impressed by these pictures. Thank you so much for sending them to us, and make sure you send us more in the future. It's always a pleasure to see them. Moving on the next photographer, David. David, we have one image from you right here. So let's have a look at it. David, it's tilting a little bit on one side just from the kind of first kind of look. The leading line, the flow works quite nicely, although the composition is a little bit unbalanced. Obviously, you have all these bright things on one side and then you have lots of dark on the other. Generally, what we're trying to do when we're looking for balance, we're trying to kind of take the scene, and if you would put it on like a weight, it should kind of really be balanced there. Anyway, let's have a look at it. Let's see if we have any details about the actual image. So you were using Fujifilm, ISO 800, f10, 1/500 of a second. Just to kind of start with, I think for a scene like this where looking at it, it looks like it was maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you have a really good light. I think I would stick with the ISO around 100. Depends what your camera and gear is able to do, but that would be my starting point. When you're shooting landscape like this, with your f-stop, you want to stay somewhere between 7 and 11. Those are usually the best numbers to start with until you start to do more complicated stuff. And then usually either go for the aperture mode and then let the camera to set up your shutter speed automatically, or look for the values on your camera and go ahead and just kind of dial what shutter speed is needed there. 1/500 of a second is super fast, so there should be no problem. And that's what I would start with when it comes to the technical point of view. When you have ISO 800, you get lots of noise in the image generally, which there is mostly visible on the actual river. I wonder if we would open the shadows. Let's do that in a light. You see how much noise and artifacts you get in a shadow. So that's just something to kind of think of for the future. When it comes to setting up your ISO, depending on your camera, on your gear, there will be certain value. So for example, on my Sony, it's 2500, where until about 2500, I can fix lots of the noise in a post-processing. Once I get over that value, I can't fix it. It doesn't, it starts to be blurry and unsharp and the colors not really looking right. So depending what I'm shooting, I'm trying to stay in these brackets. Now, depending on what camera you're using, that will be different for you. Some cameras like the older Olympus or all the Canons are bringing that kind of value somewhere around 600, 700, 800. Some cameras much higher. So you really kind of need to try and see. But when you see how sharp is this part, and then when you go into the darker part, how you almost lost the details, that's what I'm trying to tell you and explain. So just for the next time. So technically that would be my one thing. I would start by the setting of the camera. If you struggle to start with, the aperture mode is the best to start with when it comes to photography. So set it to aperture mode on your camera, ISO 100, set f7 till 11, depending how much of the detail and the depth of field you want to capture, and let the camera choose the shutter speed. It's not 100% sharp. I think probably the sharpest part is this part of the image, but when you zoom in, you see how it's just a touch blurry. So I wonder if you had a tripod or no, and also what part of the image the camera was focusing on. So something to keep an eye on for the future. But other than that, that's where I would leave it with the technical part of the image. When it comes to composition, as I say, I think the flow and the leading line here works quite well, but I think again, kind of coming to the basics of the composition, it's a little bit unbalanced. I think you have lots of bright parts on one side of the image, which doesn't balance with the dark part here. It's a bit difficult to say what is your main subject and main message. What is it you're trying to capture? If it's the river, then there is a lot of other stuff happening around, so it's not as easy to say. So maybe something to kind of look at for the future in a composition. Pick a one subject, one spot, something which is kind of quiet, dominant as a focal point, and kind of start by photographing that, and then you can start to incorporate other things into it. I also think it's tilting just a little bit, which can be really easily fixed. So I think probably something like this is more realistic and something to kind of keep an eye on for the future. When it comes to post-processing, I think you have a lot of dark spots here. Let's just have a look quickly here in light. When I hit blacks, No. And whites, it's all good. So I think you have lots of dark areas here. So I would maybe open the shadows just a little bit more. Also, your image in overall is really green. So something to keep an eye on is your white balance. So when I go into the color, white balance, and I click on auto, you will see how it's going to push the tint up. And that's basically because when the camera is capturing a picture with lots of predominant one color, so for this example is the green, there's lots of green in the river, there's lots of green on the trees, the camera starts to actually add that color into other colors and other parts of the image. So in your case, into the rocks and everything. So if I zoom in, and I'll show you before, you can see how the kind of green tint is on the actual rocks, which is not natural. And sometimes it's good to kind of go into the color in your Lightroom, click on auto and get the basic, and then go ahead and move the sliders how you need. So that would be another suggestion. Other than that, I would leave it. So David, go ahead and start by picking up more dominant focal point to start with, and then we can keep adding other stuff afterwards. Anyway, David, take care. Send us more pictures in the future. I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see more images next time. Moving to the next photographer, we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we have a lovely black and white photo from you here, so let's jump into it. Black and white, more on a kind of brighter side. It's almost like a minimal white edit here. From the first impression, I quite like it as a composition. It's kind of nicely balanced. So let's have a look at it. Let's see if we have details from the photo, and we do. So Canon here, ISO 5000. Ooh, that's a high setting. So I wonder if the data is right. It was in August, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So you should still have a plenty light. So just kind of coming back to the similar thing I was just talking about with David. When it comes to ISO, always the goal is to stick as close as to 100 as possible. Once you start to increase the ISO, you will start to add additional digital noise to the image. And when I look into your sky, for example, here, it's really visible. And when I look at the other parts, it's really visible as well. So when it comes to post-processing and removing of the noise, let's see if we can get some more noise here as well, probably. And in the grass, it's kind of visible as well. So when it comes to ISO and removing it, and the noise created by it, and then removing it and post-processing, each camera, depending on the type, quality, and also usually how newer it is, because the newer cameras can handle the higher ISO much better now. There will be certain threshold where once you step over it, it's really difficult to remove in post-processing. Different camera, different settings. My first camera was Olympus, and really I couldn't go more than 300 on my ISO settings. When I did that, I started to get lots of weird colors and lots of noise. And now my recent camera, the Sony A7R Mark IV, I can go as far as 2500 ISO, and I can really remove lots of the noise still by then. So you just need to find out what is the best settings. 5000 is a lot. So just something to kind of keep an eye on the future. F8 is, well, it's good. It's ideal for the situation. As I always say, starting points between 7 and 11. So F8 works. And 320th of a second is a good shutter speed, but as there is no moving subject, you could have gone much slower, and that would help you to bring the ISO down. So you can usually go as far as 1/50th, 1/60th of a second. So there is a lots of space there to kind of push that down and then bring down the ISO. To start with, I always suggest to start with aperture mode, set up your f-stop, somewhere between 7.1 and 11, depending how far away from you are your main subjects. Set up your ISO on 100, and then let the camera decide the shutter speed and start from there. Anyway, when it comes to composition, I quite like it. I'm big fan of photographing buildings in this kind of straight on view, and especially when they are like this, almost kind of creating mirror effect. I think that works really well. Obviously, the only part which I always kind of look for is the fact that there is this building here and there is a building here, which creates little bit of unbalance, but it's not a big deal. I think what is really nice here is the leading line created by this wood part and the kind of the stairs. I think the building in overall creates a really nice balance mirror effect right there. So I think that works really, really well here as well. And in overall, I think you've done very well. I think a good eye for a composition, Elizabeth, here. Talking about post-processing, I think it's just a little bit on a bright side. I would push a little bit the blacks and contrasts here. So let's have a look. Unless you want to leave it really kind of bright like this. So if I would push the contrast, I think that would help. I think if I would push the black a little bit, that would help as well. Then in effects, we could push a little bit the clarity, just to kind of add some texture a little bit into the image. And what I would do, I think this gradient here works really well. And then one on the top there is as well, but obviously that gradient is bringing out this noise. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye on. You could do a little bit of local adjustments, maybe with brush and bringing down the exposure. Again, just to add a little bit more contrast and highlight the actual highlight the texture on the image. So that's about it for me for this one, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for sending it over. We went through what we could. Hopefully this will be helpful, and hopefully I can see more pictures from you in the near future. Moving on the next photographer, we have a Jerry. Jerry, let's have a look what we have from you. 2 images right here. I'm assuming it's a similar location. Very kind of natural capture, natural edit with a lovely, lovely reflection. So let's talk about it. First image right here, except this part, I really, really like it. I think it's a lovely, lovely view, and you had almost perfect reflection. So well done on that there. And let's have a look at this image here, which is probably, I wonder if it's just no, it's a little bit somewhere else. I think in overall, this picture works a little bit more because we have this foreground, which works really, really well. Either or, both of them are very, very nice. So let's have a look at them. Talking about this image and your settings, ISO 100, perfect, f8, perfect, 1/40th of a second, perfect. So as a setting of your camera goes, perfect. I have no issue here. When it comes to sharpness, it seemed pretty sharp for me right there. The light is very, very nice as well. So it's either early morning or afternoon, but I think this looks more like a sunrise. So it's great as well. And well done for this one. Talking about this one, the sharpness on the stones is there. So well done. Technically, your camera was again on ISO 100, f7.1, 1/30th of a second. So spot on. And then again, sharpness all the way, nice light. So well done, Jerry, on this. Talking of the composition. So when it comes to composition, I think you have lots of sky there, which doesn't really need to be there. And you could place the reflection easily in the middle of the image, which generally creates a more balanced composition. So I would do something like this. And then, Jerry, I would definitely go ahead and try to remove this and this. Either in post-processing, or next time I would try to see if I can actually push a little bit more closer to the actual view and avoid these elements, which doesn't really add anything. Those are bits which we call confusing foreground elements. And it's generally things like trees, bushes, cars, lampposts, buildings, people, which appear on the image without actually the viewer knowing where they are from, why they're there, or so on. So generally, the problem is that us as a photographers, when we are on the location, we know why it's there because we've been there, so we remember the whole scene, where for the viewer, he has no idea why, for example, there would be branch here. It would just be confusing and the composition wouldn't be as clean. So sometimes it's as simple as maybe going ahead and try to do something like this. So you can see it's really kind of easy fix. Sometimes you have to do a little bit more and maybe work in a Photoshop to remove it, but this shouldn't be as complicated. As you can see, sometimes it's really simple to be able to remove these parts, and it will improve the composition in overall. Talking about this one on composition, I'm happy at this one, although I think there is a little bit of cleaning to be done here as well. But I think in overall, you have the idea. I think in this picture, I think it works really, really well. The foreground is nice. The middle ground and background works nicely as well. I really like the positioning here as well. I would maybe go more like this, because again, I always try to kind of keep away parts of the image which don't really add anything to the composition, and I think that's the case here. There isn't any crazy gradient, crazy clouds there which add anything to it, and by me lowering the actual view, the golden points are pointing more towards the main subject, which are the reflection, mountains, and the forest. Now, when it comes to post-processing, you have lovely natural editing, so well done on that. Obviously, I would open the shadows just a little bit more to kind of bring more details on the actual trees. So just a touch there. With the highlights, maybe bring them down a little bit, but not too crazy. Check again for your whites, check again for your blacks, and bring them down just a little. And that's about it, maybe a little bit of contrast. When it comes to your color and a white balance, let's see if we go for auto. It looks like there was much more warmth than what your edit was showing. Maybe you don't have to go for as far as 20, but just a little bit to remove some of the blues, and that's about it. I think it looks stunning. Beautiful, beautiful image. Well done on that. And then similarly here, really just open a little bit of the shadows to, again, making sure that we have a little bit of the details popping out, especially on the print. If you would leave it, it would look really dark. So just open up a little bit of the shadows. I think checking my whites, checking my blacks, something like this, and then keep an eye on my white balance again. So go to auto, and not as far, but maybe just something like this. In overall, I think well done, Jerry. Great 2 pictures. Love the captures, love your technical skills. Also, the composition is super well done here. So well done on finding this location, and well done on sending us your images. It's a pleasure to see them. Hopefully I can see more of them in the future. Moving to the next photographer, Mao. We have 2 pictures from you right here. So let's have a look at them. Kind of seascape, harbor view right here, and then a really nice waterfall right here. First impression, really shame that you kept your signature on it, and that goes for everybody. When you're sending your pictures for the reviews, always try to stay away from signatures, watermarks, additional frames, because it takes lots of attention away from your image, and it's just a shame. There are some photographers and some of my colleagues who actually reject images with signatures, so just for the future, so you can save yourself some time. Now, talking about first impression, there is lots happening on this image. It's very, very saturated. Also, I wonder if you did some sky replacements here, because I can see some kind of artifacts left over on different part of the image, but that's just something for afterwards. On this one, lovely waterfall, but again, the white balance is a little bit kind of orange side, and I'm not 100% sure if the sky was there or not. Also, you're getting some sensor dust here, so something to kind of look at on. So first one starting here, let's see, there is no camera details. Let's see if the other picture does it. No, neither one have a camera detail, so it's a bit difficult to say. I think all these elements are sharp, so well done. The long exposure looks quite cool. I quite like it here, actually. And then we have the sky, which again, I'm just not 100% sure. Something looks a little bit off on it, but I don't want to say that it's the sky replacement, because I'm not 100% sure about it, but usually these kind of artifacts you can see here and here are from sky replacement here. But when it comes to the technical point of view, everything is sharp, the light is interesting, so well done there. When it comes to this one, and we're talking about technical point of view, I don't know if it's because the image is really small, but when I zoom in, it's a bit difficult to see the sharpness because everything gets super quickly pixelated, as you can see here. The only thing I can see is this sensor dust, so something to keep an eye on, which there is a video under this video where I show how to remove this. So it's really just as fast as this. And technically, I think the sun looks quite cool, actually. I think if it was there like this, it's nicely captured. The only thing is, which kind of surprised me, is that you have a sun here. And when I look at the ridge, it really looks like the sun is actually shining from here. So I'm not 100% sure if this would be correct like this. I think the sun is here and you're getting shadows from behind the sun. I'm not sure. Anyway, so technically, it's just a shame that it's really small quality because it's difficult to say how much details are there. On this one, it's a bit easier because it's sharp. Composition-wise, this one, quite interesting. I think this works as a foreground element, so I have no problem with it. I think it's a little bit of a shame that the bolt is cut off because obviously with the kind of long exposure, it's a part of the story, so it's feels like part of the story is actually missing there. So something just to keep an eye on for the future. I think your geometry is a little bit off. Let's see if we can just help to it here in geometry by using the auto. And yeah, it helped a little bit. Just kind of straighten everything. This looks like really wide lens, so that's why some of the houses looks like they are kind of falling on one side. But other than that, I think composition is quite strong on this one. On this one, it's a nice flow of the image with actually placing the waterfalls here. It works quite nicely. And I think the composition is quite cool. I like how you have a 1/3 of a sky, 2/3 of the ground. It's kind of the flow helps to the depth of the field, even though there is no significant foreground element here. I think it works overall. So well done there. Post-processing, this one, I think it's a bit oversaturated. So I would probably bring the saturation down just a little bit. So maybe something like this. I would again check my white balance to see what it actually gives us. And that's why I thought, so a little bit less purple and a little bit less yellow would be my choice. And right away it becomes much more natural in overall. And that's about it on this one. I think other than that, it's quite cool. On post-processing this one, I think the white balance is definitely off. I think there is lots of this yellow coming out. Maybe not as much, but something like this. And in overall, I think because it's such a low quality image for what you shared with us, it's a bit difficult for me to tell you further because any edit I do to it, it kind of damages really quickly. So for future, if you have a larger files, it would be really helpful so I can give you more advice on what to do with them and what I think of them. Overall now, I think the long exposure here, great. Long exposure, great. The compositions are quite nice. So you're doing super well. So better pictures in the future. Try to not put your signatures on it, and then we can see what we can do further. So I hope to see more pictures from you in the future. Until next time, take care. Moving on to the next photographer, Melissa. Melissa, we have two images here to look at. So let's have a look. First, we have this coast, which I'm not 100% sure if this is what you wanted to share with us, because obviously it's a lots of images which are kind of shifted around. And I know that there is a certain effect, a photography effect, which is used like this, but generally it's a scene built with multiple single photos, overlaying much less than this one. So I'm not 100% sure, but we're still gonna look at it. On this one, blue hour with really kind of significant foreground element here, and in some way it works. So let's look at them, Melissa. Let's start by this one, then again let's see if we have any information. So you have your Nikon ISO 100 f22 3/5 of a second. So ISO 100, great. f22, I wonder why. But then I'm assuming that you maybe didn't have an ND filter and you wanted to get some of the long exposure here, which is actually very nicely captured. I really like how you have still texture remaining into the water, and then you have this nice smooth velvet kind of effect on the waves. So well done there. And that's technically, I think, about it. I think the sharpness here on the stones works really, really well. There is a lovely texture and glow in the sky, so the exposure is done nicely as well. You went for your highlights, so well done in overall. So again, talking about the technical part of the image, ISO 100, f18, 25 seconds. So I'm assuming you're using your f-stop to play around with the long exposure, which works as well. Certainly when you get to that point, this is why you're getting, for example, the sensor dust here. I can see one here a little bit. Maybe a little bit in the sky, but it works. It's a technique which I think is well done. There is lots of blue happening here, but kind of sticking with the technical part. I really like the sharpness on the foreground element. You're getting a little bit of noise coming out on the kind of darker parts of the image, which I'm not 100% sure why. It really depends on how it was photographed, how underexposed you were for the situation and so on. But in overall, technically, it kind of works. When I look at the back all the way, and maybe that's because of the quality of the image, it looks really, really blurry there and really kind of pixelated from noise. So just something to kind of keep in on future. Maybe if you really like to use long exposure and it looks super cool, ND filter is the way to go. I used to use f-stop a lot as well to play around, and of course if you're on a location and you don't have an ND filter with you, that's what you have to do. But you will find out that eventually you get to the spot when the high f-stop and low light will start to really create kind of funny artifacts on the image. So just for the future. When we talk about composition, so the only thing is I'm not 100% sure if you meant it to do it like this, if it was meant to kind of be all over each other. If yes, I can't really judge it that much. I would need to know that information. But in overall, I think the flow of the image really works. I think it's a really nice kind of leading line, leading towards the lovely sky with the tree and forest. I think it works really nicely. Again, the fact that you left some texture on the water helps to fill up the space, so it makes it a little bit more balanced in overall. And in overall, I think composition wise, it's really, really lovely image. So well done, Melissa. Talking about this one composition, really nice, a different kind of thing. Obviously, your main subjects are those rocks. So you would say this is your kind of foreground. That is, the water is your middle ground and that is your background. So that works. The fog is really nice here. And generally at the kind of, I think the panoramatic crop really works here. So well done here and well done on that. Talking about post-processing, the overlapping, I don't know, but the rest, I think on this picture specifically works really nice. The white balance is spot on here. Your shadows are open just enough, I think. Your highlights as well. And I think generally it's really, really nice. I like the colors in the sky and it's lovely. Talking about this one, I think there is lots of blue happening here. For my opinion, almost too much. If I go to auto, it tries to kind of push it down. Let's see if we would just remove a little bit of the blue to get maybe somewhere like this and kind of stick with the purple. That would be my suggestion. I would also bring down the vibrance a little bit to make it a little bit more natural. But it's just me. Maybe also bring down the exposure a little bit and really just focus on these points. Melissa, in overall, those two pictures are great. You're doing very well with your long exposure, so well done. ND filter is maybe for future something to keep an eye on. And make sure you send us more pictures in the future. We'd love to see them. Take care, and until next time, bye-bye. Moving on to the next photographer, we have a Michael. Michael, we have one image from you, and what the beauty. Let's talk about it right here. Lovely leading line, lovely light, lovely texture in the sky with, I'm assuming it's a vineyard or something like that. So let's look at the details. You are using Nikon, ISO 100, spot on. F11, perfect, obviously with different elements being in different distance from you. I think that works really, really well. 1/60th of a second, so just enough to keep everything nice and sharp. Great texture in the sky, so your exposure and highlights, everything really works here. You have a little bit of harsher shadows, obviously happening because of the sun being on the side, but in overall, I think it's a great picture and technically well captured. Talking about composition, the leading line and the flow guiding you towards that part of the image works quite nicely. I think it's a little bit of a shame. I'm assuming maybe it was a wide lens. Let's have a look. F14. This is why everything is kind of a little bit falling. So as you can see, specifically this part, the fence is really falling one side, and then this part again the other. So just something to kind of keep an eye in the future. I wonder if maybe in geometry we could help to it just a little bit. And it doesn't do much because it's a big scene, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. Obviously we could kind of try to turn it around just a little bit, maybe on this part, but then the other parts start to turn as well. I really like what you've done with the sky. I think it works. I think composition wise, with the road, with the view, with the sun coming from the side, I think it really works. I think it's lovely, Michael, and well done on this capture. In post-processing, that is just a little bit too much of a yellow for me. So let's have a look at your white balance if we would go for auto. And I think you see how it kind of pushed down the temperature. I don't think it has to go as far, but I think somewhere in the middle is the true. And similarly with the tint, I wouldn't go as far as 20, but maybe somewhere in about 9, just to keep it a little bit more natural. This is also a lot to do with your screen, with your graphic card, and what monitor you're looking at. So I'm looking at iMac here, and maybe that's what I'm seeing, but in overall, I think the white balance, this is what I would do with it. Lots of saturation, which I think really works here. Highlights, shadows, well done. The exposure was well done. And in overall, it's a lovely, lovely image. So Michael, thank you so much for sending it over. If you have more pictures, make sure you send them to us again in next week or for one of the episodes in the future. Moving on the next photographer, we have Paul here. And Paul, actually, I have reviewed your photos in last week's episode already. So make sure you head there. I'm not going to review them again. That would not make any sense. So if you have a moment, head to last week's episode, which would be probably 4th or 5th of December. I will make the link here in the corner of the video and you can see the review right there. Next photographer, Petr K. Peter, let's have a look at your images right here. And they are stunning. The only thing is, specifically this one, that they are a little bit blurry, which is to do more with the size of the image, I think. 1920 on 1080. Yeah, so just Peter, if you send us more pictures in the future, make sure they are a little bit bigger so we can review them properly from there. But then overall, let's talk about them. Absolutely stunning image right here. Beautiful colors, beautiful composition. Loving this one already. And this one as well, really nice work with your, I assume, wide lens. This effect really works nicely. I think this part, creating the leading line and the flow towards the sun, is great. And I think the whole kind of valley going in works really well as well. Lovely capture of the sun. So in overall, this is a lovely image as well. So let's talk about it. We're looking at this one, Nikon Z6, your camera settings, ISO 100, spot on, f8, brilliant, and 1/40th of a second, with your lens being 280 millimeters. So that's why it's creating this really lovely effect. Beautiful, beautiful, probably, I'm assuming summer capture with these little trees, lonely trees with the little, like a praying spot. I think it works very, very nice. I really like the crop as well. Let's have a look. I think the problem will be that when I zoom in, I'm assuming it's all sharp, so it really works here. The light is good as well, so technically really well done. On this one, it doesn't show the information about the camera sadly, but ISO 100 again. The lens was something around 10. F14, your f-stop, obviously talking about being so close to the elements, it kind of makes sense here. 1/80th of a second, well done. Obviously capturing a sun, there are multiple different ways of how you can do it. You went for the glow with the kind of star effect coming from the sun, and I think it works here. There is still some texture in the sky, which is great, and it really fills up the space, and it actually makes the composition in overall even more balanced. So well done on that, Peter. Talking about composition, I think this works super well. The panorama with placing your main subject into the lower third works really well. I think the sun in overall helps as well. The kind of contrast between the different parts creates really nice depth of field here, which is even more pushed by the main element here again. There's lots of lovely things happening, but it's still kept quite nice and simple. So in overall composition wise, I think this works super well. On this one, I already mentioned it on the beginning. I think the grass or the kind of field grass leaning towards you, really creating a really nice flow in the image. And again, the valley kind of floating towards the other side, towards the hills, again works really well. I think the panorama for this picture is lovely, and again keeping the sky in a third, I think really works nicely in contrast with the 2/3 of the image being the land. The sun almost towards the third, again just really good capture and a lovely scene here. Post-processing, nothing to add to this one. It's nice, it's saturated. I think the white balance is spot on. Nice contrast, a little bit of dodge and burn there as well. So I think that works well. On this one, on my screen, it's kind of heading towards lots of yellow. So that would be my only thing with some kind of bits of green. So let's just quickly have a look at auto white balance. And it kind of, probably because of the size of the image, it really kind of push it off. But in overall, you know what, I think it's really nicely done. Again, kind of nice contrast created with the light here, and then kind of darker parts. Your sky and clouds are really defined, so I would just keep an eye a little bit on the highlights and maybe clarity to make them a little bit more fluffy in this case. But again, in overall, great edit and great pictures. Peter, I'm impressed by your images. Well done on your work. And if you have a time for future, make sure you send us more, because we would absolutely love to see them. And also, if you haven't joined us yet, we have a Facebook group called Clever Photographer Academy. It's a great spot where we talk a lot about pictures and photography, and pictures like yours would be a great inspiration for the others. So make sure you come and join us there. Moving on, the next photographer, last two photographer, we have a Sushant. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Sometimes some of the names are a little bit foreign for me, so please don't take it personally. I try to do my best. So we actually got a fair bit of images from you. And I'm coming back to the beginning again. We have lots of images to look at, so we can only do 1 or 2 pictures per photographer. So looking here, I have choose 3 pictures just as an example of your work. So kind of, I think first thing you really need to work on is composition and start to look at the clean subjects. I think your scenes are in overall very busy. Not necessarily this one, but this one, there's lots happening on it. And this one definitely as well. I think your key and my suggestion for you when it comes to composition is to find very strong and dominant focal point, building, tree, road, anything like that, and start by photographing that, and then move on kind of more complicated scenes. But talking about technical point of view, starting right here, if we have some details here, it looks like it was photographed with phone. Obviously, ISO 100 is good. f1.8 is way too low, but in overall, I mean, the image is sharp. There are some details at the back as well, although it's tilting on one side. So that's about this one. This one, again, we are with the phone, and the image isn't really sharp. When I zoom in, you can see lots of kind of blur happening, and it's really kind of soft. You're also getting lots of noise, and that's sometimes to do with maybe the performance of the mobile phone when there is a lots of light happening in. Although the light is really nice on this image, so well done there. On this one, the image is sharp, so it's good. Again, we're using Samsung here, but there's a lot of noise in the sky again, so something to kind of keep an eye on for the future. Composition wise, I already described the whole thing. Start by looking for a simple focal point, simple subjects, dominant subjects, and start to capture them. So for example, what I would do here, I would go ahead and actually just focus on the boat right here. Maybe leave a little bit of this as a foreground. Definitely remove some of this. Make sure that it's straight. And suddenly we're starting to talk about composition and photography. So we have a really simple dominant subject. Next thing I would be looking for is a cleaner area. So for example, here there is a lots of mess. So obviously that can be removed to some degree right here. again. So just to make it a little bit more pleasing. So that would be another thing. So this is what I would this is what I would suggest you to do to start with. Look for the simple composition like this one right here. Compared to this, obviously, this is where it gets complicated. And to start with, it's easier to start with something a little bit like that. This one, I'm not really sure. Lots happening. There's lots of mess again. It's tilting a little bit. So it's more something like this, I think. And I would probably crop it a little bit more as well, just to get more out of the image. So maybe something like this. On this one, again, it's tilting. So in geometry, you can fix it a little bit. But then there is so much happening. The street is so busy that it's difficult to start with. You have your kind of lines here, which makes it really busy. So my suggestion for your composition, for your photography, if you're going to use a mobile phone, start by simple subjects. For example, again, on this one, you could really just focus on the tuk-tuk here, or however you call this car, and start by doing that, and then kind of work it out from there. Post-processing, I don't really think that there is much done on it here, so we don't need to really focus on about it. But in overall, Sushant, thank you for sending your picture. Thank you for being brave. This is my suggestion to you, and I hope that you can move forward from there. Moving on, the last photographer of this week, we have Teodor. Teodor, I have 2 images from you. I put them in a landscape because I think in overall they are landscape, obviously with lots of kind of effects and post-processing done here, which I'm a big fan of. No problem there. Just for the next future, try to stay away from adding frames and signatures and so on, because it kind of really take away a lot from the attention of the image. There is some details of the actual picture. So right here, ISO 500 f10 1/640th of a second. Just again, as a reminder, the lower the ISO, the less noise added to the image. So that would be my suggestion here. Other than that, technically, it's kind of interesting capture. And I think it kind of provoked the viewer to think about the image. So well done there. Talking about this one, ISO 320, f16 1/60th of a second. And you're getting some kind of blur motion here. And I wonder if it's like it's lots of kind of thinking about what is it you captured. It seems like there's maybe different pictures on top of each other. And it's really interesting. Again, just a reminder, ISO as low as possible. F-stop depending what you're capturing. Usually the kind of starting points are between 7 and 11, and then depending on the situation and what you try to capture, you can go higher or lower here. Talking about composition, this one is nice and interesting. With the stop, I think it kind of works. I think it's quite cool. This one, I'm not 100% sure what you're trying to show. I think the leading line and flow is quite nice, but in overall, there's lots happening there and it's kind of busy. When I have to talk about the post-processing, the shame is that the pictures are really small quality, so it's difficult for me to tell you or show you anything on the images, because when they this small, any editing I will do, I will just damage the image. So for future, if you have more pictures and you would like us to look at them, Teodor, make sure you send them in a bigger resolution so we can tell you more about it. Teodor, if you have more pictures in the future, make sure you send them. And that same goes for all of you folks. If you want to join us for the next photography review show, it's going to be on 20th of December. You can head to our website, cleverphotography.com/review. And there you can find all the dates, all the links, and all the information on how to join us and how to get help with your own images. So thank you very much for joining us this week. And until next week, keep shooting.